You guys, when I think back to Harry Potter, I remember reading the books in high school, in my empty Spanish class during lunch like a loser, and spending countless nights playing the PC game. So when the movies finally came out, I was blown away by how each film finally showed the magic I had read about for so long. In this video, let's peek beyond the veil and take a closer look at the visual and practical effects throughout all 8 movies. From Hogwarts to hippogriffs, Marauders maps to magic spells, and Quidditch games to wizard battles. And after seeing how all these iconic scenes were put together, we can better appreciate what a cultural landmark this franchise really was. So slip on that sorting hat, twist that Timeturner, and let's go back all the way to the Sorcerer's Stone. After having some asbestos for breakfast, Harry Potter learns that he's a wizard and takes a trip to Diagonally. The entire street was built from scratch, all ending with a green screen, later replaced by Gringotts Bank. It's there that we're introduced to the first magical creatures of the wizarding universe, Goblins. After coming up with the design, all the form and detail was carefully sculpted and painted. 60 actors were brought on set, and each one went through 2 to 3 hours of the grueling makeup process. Oh my! Some of the actors, understandably, started getting a little annoyed with the director Chris Columbus.
And I remember one guy, I was trying to get a performance out of him. You need to convey that you hate Harry. And he goes, yeah, I hate you. And I said, excuse me? He goes, I hate you.
But being a big fan of using practical creatures over CG ones, it's amazing to see the effort everyone went through to give us such believable goblins, even ones that only show up for just a split second in the background. Their next stop is Ollivanders, and it's here that Harry shops for his first wand. Throughout the 8 movies, 130 character wands would be created, with over 2,000 wands for background extras. But it all started with this one. A light turns on, wind blows around, and that legendary music by John Williams sells that awe-inspiring magic. With all his school supplies in the bag, Harry checks off the list and ends up at platform 9 3/4. And with some encouragement from Mrs. Weasley, Harry takes the first step. The platform wall detaches, giving the crew room to back into, staying locked on Harry as everyone passes through. The VFX artists just had to fade on a dark back wall and wipe a front wall with this passing actor. After piling all the kids onto rowboats, we finally arrive at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. To really capture the magic and show audiences something they've never seen before, they started with paper and eventually created an enormous scale model.
The Hogwarts Castle model, that's the best model I've made. This is the one that stays in my mind.
Since it would actually be used for filming, literally showing up on IMAX screens, the detail in every corner had to hold up. They built towers and turrets, walkways and bridges, rock faces and windows. Every tiny bit had to light up for nighttime shots and also be covered in fake snow. Just take a look at this crazy long shot from Goblet of Fire as the camera starts on Harry and pulls out along a snowy hillside. Daniel Radcliffe slowly walks on a green treadmill and is layered into a landscape section that's mixed into the scale model, with Cho Chang being dropped onto a separate model of a foreground tower. The whole thing is like a puzzle, and even after understanding how it all comes together, it's still pretty amazing. Before CGI started taking over and every structure would become digitally rendered, a model like this was really the last of its kind and gave us some iconic shots of Hogwarts over the years. But once the kids enter the Great Hall, we begin to see the magic inside. The floating candles were actually dangling from strings on a pulley system, making them go up and down.
So much of that would be visual effects now. The fact that we got to actually be on that set.
It was amazing. Like, no acting required.
Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?
Maybe you could have used some acting, right, Emma? After dinner, the kids turn a corner and we see those famous moving staircases. By starting with another scale model, they built the staircase on wheels so they could slowly roll it around. The VFX artists just went in later and added the rest of the building, from base CG to textures, lighting, atmosphere, and then the final image. Another way they extended the space was in Half-Blood Prince, where they filmed students on green screen stairs and just repeated them all the way down. With the magic portraits, they hand-painted the backdrops, then filmed the actors against a blue screen, then put all that onto the actual footage. It's crazy to think all this time was spent on wall art, but because of details like this, Hogwarts really came to life in a way that surprised audiences all over the world.
Amazing!
Harry attends some classes, gets some mail, and ends up fighting a...
in the dungeon!
By starting with the illustration in the actual book, they designed a detailed version with a bit more cake and sculpted it out. For close-up shots where you can see its feet or its face, they built a real troll, but for full body shots with bigger movement, they went entirely CG. The end result got the job done, even if it was a bit cartoony. Later on, Harry becomes the Seeker on the Gryffindor team, and after a quick lesson on how the sport works, "Yo, Oliver Wood, you dumbass, the stitch is right here!" For the first time ever, we finally see Quidditch on the big screen.
I invented Quidditch on one evening after a row with my then boyfriend, which may explain some of the violence.
What? The actors made it all look pretty easy, but shooting it was a whole different story. The brooms were mounted about 7 feet into the air on a rotating pole that was also traveling on a track. You can imagine what that felt like.
Balance is very, very difficult, and also certain very, very important organs are crushed.
He's talking about his nuts, if you didn't get that. And with the giant fans blowing around, it was a miracle these kids were even able to hang on. With the previs worked out and the action filmed, they extracted the actors and put in the background, with Hogwarts off in the distance, and the stadium stands in the midground, with the crowd shot separately on another stage. For Chamber of Secrets, a new element was added when Harry and Draco descend to the trenches of the stadium. But all that was child's play, compared to Quidditch in Prisoner of Azkaban. Although the game was much shorter, there was so much more going on visually. Pouring rain drenching everyone, Dementors swirling around, and lightning striking the players.
I think that made it very different for Quidditch, which traditionally had been sort of a bright, sunny day. Now it's something a little darker.
By Half-Blood Prince, the final Quidditch match we would ever see showed how much the team had learned over the years. With each new movie, as the stakes and audience expectations grew, so did their crowds from this to this to this. And keep in mind how scrawny all the kids were when they first started filming Quidditch. 8 years later, they were full-grown adults and needed state-of-the-art broom rigs that could pull off even crazier motion. What started from just words on a page was interpreted by the actors and refined over hundreds of different versions. Hundreds! And with all that being said, let's move on to the Chamber... Oh wait, give me a sec. Okay, I'm good. Let's move on to the second movie, The Chamber of Secrets. Harry goes up to his room and finds an unexpected visitor.
Harry Potter, such an honor it is.
For 2002, there was a lot going on in this scene. The bed sheets shifting around, how Dobby flinches when the door closes, even fighting over a lamp is challenging to do. So how did they manage to bring such a lovable creature to the big screen?
I saw Dobby as sort of combination between E.T. and Bugs Bunny a little bit. You know, someone who is slightly mischievous and annoying.
The goal was to create a character the audience would fall in love with, to make him so endearing that even... Yikes, can we cut away? Getting him into the scenes was one challenge, but it was even harder to give him thoughts and feelings. The voice actor Toby Jones managed to make Dobby sound super pathetic and sad. So the animators had a lot of emotion to work with, and having Lucius Malfoy as his master meant that he was going to get pushed around a little. On set, the actor Jason Isaacs pretended to kick him and bop him in the head with his cane.
So Chris goes, "Cut! Okay, great. You slip or something?" And I went, No, I just kicked Dobby down the stairs." And he went, "Really?" He said, "What was the thing with the cane?" I said, "Well, when he tried to get up, I bashed him on the head." He went, "Cool."
For the technology at the time, they managed to create a three-dimensional character you could root for. After a daring escape from Privet Drive... Ha-ha! Get fucked, Uncle Vernon! And a rough start to his trip to Hogwarts. Ron receives a magical letter from his mom called a Howler. The prop artist explains how elements from the outside of the letter would be used on the inside. The envelope becomes the mouth, the ribbon becomes the tongue, and the letter itself becomes the teeth. In Goblet of Fire, Rita Skeeta uses the quick quotes quill that's also created with a mixture of props and CGI. Ron does a good job at making eye contact with the letter, Harry, not so much. And in their first Defense Against the Dark Arts class, they meet Gilderoy Lockhart, who unleashes a cage full of pixies.
They attached wire to bits of my hair, and I had to pretend they were like pulling my hair.
Going off reference like gremlins, the director wanted a mischievous look to them, almost like little blue monkeys causing destruction and mayhem. An early animation test shows how they were preparing to wreak havoc.
Round them up, there any pixies?
Good thing Hermione was there to save the day. After Miss Norris and Colin Creevey get petrified, Harry and Ron head into the Forbidden Forest to look for answers, coming face to face with a giant spider, Aragog, measuring 18 feet wide, with each strand of hair meticulously placed. Moving it around wasn't easy, which explains why he kinda just crawls out and sits there, leaving the big action scenes that come later to smaller CGI spiders. For the Basilisk, they also went CG, but for those extreme close-ups, they engineered a giant working version that gave Daniel Radcliffe something real to act against, which is always better. I mean, just look at this scene. It added nothing to the story, but to think of all the engineering that came together for such a throwaway moment, it's that kind of thing that brought the world of Harry Potter off the page and into reality. And now, moving on to my personal favorite, as Harry practices Lumos Maxima, the director Alfonso Cuarón times his performance with a glowing wand and a light box to bring us right into the Prisoner of Azkaban. When Aunt Marge pulls up and insults Harry's parents, all hell breaks loose. Harry somehow telepathically inflates her. I like how he never did that again. Could have probably defeated Voldemort with that trick.
She blows up like a balloon and floats away, and it's a lot easier to say that than it is to do it.
We see the actress put on some weight using makeup, stuffed into a fat suit, and raised up like a piñata. She slowly bounces her way out of the house, and Uncle Vernon tries desperately to hold on.
One of the weirdest things I've ever done in my life.
Okay, that's hilarious. It's here that we board the Knightbus. A shrunken head that could laugh on command sets the vibe. And by having every other car on the street drive at half speed, they sped up the footage, which made the Knightbus look super fast. With a fun mix of street shots and interior scenes, the team put together a wildly inventive sequence. And after boarding the Hogwarts Express, we're introduced to one of the most terrifying beings in the world of Harry Potter, Dementors. By starting with some pretty abstract concepts, their next step was to figure out how they would move. After blowing around some puppets and swirling them in water, they eventually had to go with CGI to create those haunting animations. But after a disheveled Lupin, comes to the rescue, we return to Hogwarts, and you can tell right away that things were going to be a little different this year. Hairstyles got messier, the candles in the Great Hall weren't so perfect anymore, and this kid was earning that paycheck. In their Care of Magical Creatures class, Hagrid introduces everyone to a hippogriff named Buckbeak. After creating the CG model, the main challenge was figuring out how he would move.
I remember the very early animations, and it was like a puppy, just jumping, very light and playful. This is this is like a baby. Buckbeak is a grown-up.
For this sequence, they started with simple storyboards, moved on to previs, and got Daniel Radcliffe to pet a real, life-size version. Every feather was placed on individually, mechanics were worked out, and the whole thing was transported and assembled on set.
Buckbeak was a phenomenal piece of design. At times, you'd look at it and it'd be moving its head and blinking, you think just any moment it's going to stand up and fly off.
And when it did fly off, Harry wrote a motion rig, already programmed with the animation, so he and Buckbeak would line up perfectly. By mixing it all with the scale model of Hogwarts again, they were able to get some truly magical shots. All the hard work from the VFX artists to the prop makers really conveyed Buckbeak's pride and majesty. Later on, Fred and George give Harry the Marauder's map.
So you mean this map shows
Everyone.
everyone?
Everyone. Where they are, what they're doing, every minute of every day.
Brilliant.
The prop artist created yet another genius bit of magic. A super detailed map with countless flaps that could fold in and out.
With tiny, tiny threads that had to be pulled in a certain order in a certain way.
Mischief managed.
The map comes into play later as Harry wanders the halls at night, looking for Peter Pettigrew, someone he thought was already dead. I don't know why that always makes me laugh. Pretty soon, we end up at the Whomping Willow. After the trio shot on a blue screen set, their surroundings were extended, and the CG tree was dropped in, with its destructive branches crashing down on the negative space left behind. And for this shot, Emma Watson clung to a giant rotating rig that was all swapped later with a CG branch. The whole sequence leads them to the Shrieking Shack, and it's there they finally meet Sirius Black.
I did my waiting! 12 years of it! In Azkaban!
Is it weird I say this too when people tell me to wait for something? On their way back to Hogwarts, Lupin transforms, Pettigrew escapes, and a swarm of Dementors attack Harry and Sirius. To get a do-over, Hermione reveals that she has a Timeturner. Out of all the iconic time travel scenes over the years, this one stands out as being pretty creative. They set up a blue screen in the room, with someone carrying a light across a space, faking a transition from nighttime back to daytime. When Harry sees himself getting sucked off by Dementors again, and realizes that no one else is coming to save the day, he does it himself. After breaking Sirius out and saying their goodbyes, Harry and Hermione return to the exact place they started.
We did it.
Did what? Good night.
Oh, Dumbledore, you rascal. Moving on, things started getting really interesting with Goblet of Fire. We start on Harry and the gang, making their way to a Portkey, a mundane but magical object that can transport you instantly to another location. All the actors grabbed onto a green carousel as fans blew and lights whizzed by. As they let go one by one, wires dragged them off into a green screen abyss, and they were then dropped right back down. Arthur, Cedric, and his dad came in a different way. Never understood why, but after settling into their magic tent, they climbed their way to the top of the stadium, a big chunk of which was physically built, then extended using CGI. And once the opposing team comes in...
Who's that? This is the best secret in the world!
It was finally time to start the Quidditch World Cup.
Let the match begin!
Oh hell yeah, guys. It's finally time! We've all been waiting so long for this!
Cut!
You son of a bitch! After the introduction of the girly girls of Beauxbatons and the manly men of Durmstrang, yes! Work that stick! We choose 3 champions, but mysteriously, Harry's chosen as the 4th. After Dumbledore asks calmly if he put his name in,
Harry, did you put your mother name in the cabinet?
we get our final lineup for the infamous Tri-Wizard Tournament, and the first challenge is a face-off with a dragon. There have been lots of dragons over the years. Serious ones, funny ones, Aquafina ones. But for Goblet of Fire, the Hungarian Horntail had to stand on its own. By starting with some concept art, they created the CG model and animated it to be a pretty convincing threat to Harry. And after going back and forth on potential locations for the sequence, they eventually decided to have the action take place in Hogwarts. With thrilling shots like this, mixed with stunt work like this, we got a sequence that perfectly kicked off the tournament. Later on, Harry has a secret midnight meeting with Sirius Black. To achieve this look, Gary Oldman did his acting with tracking dots on his face that could later be used as reference points for his CG model. After making sure everything lined up, they took the base footage and started layering in the pieces that created the final look. He tells Harry that he can't trust anyone. But let's not forget, Hogwarts is a school after all, and these witches and wizards are still just teenagers. When it comes time for the Yule Ball, Harry and Ron have to find dates. Ugh, I felt that. Eventually, the time comes for the second challenge on the Black Lake. To film this epic sequence, they built an enormous blue screen tank.
Dan had to perform while holding his breath effectively. One of the divers would swim over with the oxygen, he'd breathe, and then he would do the next take.
But once they got the right shots, it was time for the VFX artists to create the underwater environment. And we've seen a few by now, from Aquaman to Wakanda Forever to The Way of Water and The Little Mermaid. Ah! It's that friggin' crab again! How did the artists create a new world in the Potterverse that manages to hold up to this day? They built the space up in layers and brought everything to life with undulating seaweed and dangerous sea creatures. The mermaids, while graceful and elegant, could also stab you in the neck.
You know that it's a female creature, but it doesn't have very female features. It has a fish face.
Oh, and the Grindylows, while bouncy and playful, could also drown your ass.
Each of them would grab one of my legs and just sort of pull me to and fro. So that was quite exciting.
By the end of all their research and development, we got a nail-biting second challenge, even though Harry finishes last.
Next to last. Flan have got past the Grindylows.
Oh, what the hell was that accent? And with that, we finally get to the last challenge, a maze with the Triwizard Cup at the very center, disguised as a Portkey that brings Harry and Cedric right into the hands of Voldemort. Starting with some disturbing concept art. Okay, who drew this one? Yes, sick! Ralph Fiennes first did his thing, and the VFX studio MPC took away his nose to make him look truly terrifying. He and Harry battle it out. Starting from a connection point, a beam of light is created, with molten bits spewing from the center. Eventually, all the past victims of Voldemort's wand start emerging, the first ones being Harry's parents, who were shot separately against a green screen, dropped in and color corrected, and weaved in with wispy blue energy. Through the power of love, Harry manages to break the stream and escape. And after a shocking reveal that Mad-Eye Moody has been Barty Crouch Jr. this whole time. Yikes, I forgot how gross this was. Dumbledore gives Harry a dad talk, preparing him for the dangerous new world that lies ahead in Order of the Phoenix. By now, Harry has better control of his magic, and when the time comes, he shows the Dementors who's boss.
Expecto Patronus!
From studying this shot, we get a better look at Harry's Patronus, a stag, meant to be an extension of someone's personality. Other characters conjure up different animals: Hermione, an otter; Ron, a Labrador; Ginny, a horse; and Luna, a hare. The director David Yates asked them to imagine it on set, and after getting the empty footage, it was up to the VFX artists to fill in the space.
We create many different layers of effects for this. There are big, flat, wide sheets of light, very thin ropes and braids.
And as an extra step, whenever a Patronus would be standing in a real environment, they'd put some LEDs on a good boy,
which could cast light in all directions around it so it moved in its own pool of light.
But as we all know, students aren't supposed to use magic outside of school. Duh. So to fight off an expulsion from Hogwarts, Harry and Arthur find themselves traveling to the Ministry of Magic. To construct this massive hub of magical bureaucracy, the team cut out pieces of wood to be disguised as green tiles. It was, up to that point, the largest and most expensive set built for the franchise. Later on, the gang heads towards the Ministry to save Sirius, but ends up falling into a trap. I don't know why I love that so much. And just when it seems like all hope is lost, the Aurors come to the rescue. A quick jump, a blinding light, a gust of wind, and the VFX artists working their magic gave us their heroic entrance. And now with Sirius joining the fight, let's take a look at how they filmed this epic duel. You see, this is why VFX is so important. This sets up the best wizard battle in the entire franchise. For this shot, the crew sprints down the hall with a camera on a cart, and the VFX artists extend the background with the rest of the ministry. Wind cannons blow at their robes to show the power of their spells, and those wooden tiles they put in were rigged up to explode in all the mayhem.
You can see all of these practical explosions showering around Dan with the slates coming off, and he's really sitting in the middle of that, so he's reacting to every single explosion. It's real.
And for each blast, the VFX artist timed bolts of magic electricity to hit the same spots. The 5 months that were spent building every detail of the ministry were gone in a second, but at least it looked cool. For Voldemort's next trick, Ralph Fiennes rehearses the action on set, which had lights at the top that flooded the space with red, turning up the heat.
We built the snake out of this hot liquid magma core, and then we launched flames up over his whole surface so we could reveal features and give a little character.
Now, it's Dumbledore's turn. Big props to the sound designers. I could listen to that water whistle all day. Voldemort was raised up and spun around against a blue screen, and after all that, CG water was worked out on top, then dropped into the footage with the background filled in. And speaking of sound design, oh, so good! We see for this shot, they used a fully CG environment and just dropped the tiny actors in later. This shower of glass becomes Voldemort's last weapon. Voldemort sees that he has no shot against Dumbledore, so he goes for Harry instead. I love how he does that. The imagination and technical mastery from every single person involved made this a spectacle for the ages. It's levels of creativity that the Fantastic Beasts movies never even came close to. What the hell is happening here? In the aftermath of the fight, Harry and his friends band together to face the uncertain future in Half-Blood Prince. We find Harry catching up on some news.
Hey, I was wondering...
11. That's when I get off.
Okay, Harry, get it? But after Dumbledore shows up and ruins his date, we see an upgrade to how they disapparate. From the first time it was shown in the last movie. The look went through quite a loopy, stretchy redesign. Sometimes, to save on costs, they do it off camera. Don't think I don't see what you're doing. But pretty soon, Harry and Dumbledore show up at the house of Horace Slughorn.
Merlin's beard!
So how did they create this quick but charming introduction? Starting with some initial sketches, they worked through a few different looks of the fabric tearing. After that, the actor was then lifted up.
We basically put him on a plank of wood and sit him on this plank of wood. It's a little bit more elaborate than a plank of wood, but it's kind of a plank of wood.
It's a shiny plank of wood.
It's a shiny plank of wood.
Hey, say plank of wood some more. He then pretends to shake off the fabric, and based on his performance, the VFX artists mirrored the animation to his actual movements, and got the CG to match up perfectly with the pajamas he was wearing. Since the jig was up, it was time to put everything back where it belonged. After shooting in a mostly empty room, they dropped in the CG furniture, sometimes mixing it with real elements filmed on a blue screen. A few dusty bits get added in and give us the final shot.
That was fun.
Harry returns to Hogwarts, takes potions class, and kisses Ginny. Aw, I don't need to see that. But after taking Felix Felicis, getting Slughorn's memories, and learning more about Voldemort's Horcruxes, the real action begins when Dumbledore takes Harry to a Cavussi. Given the crystal material, there was a lot to study about the form it would take and how light and shadows would reflect and rake across. By building out chunks of it on a green screen stage and extending it with CG, they created the perfect setting for the creepy Inferi attack.
If I had been kept underwater for
for 20 years, I'd come up looking white and skinny.
Some people would like to be white and skinny. After getting some unpaid interns to wiggle around on the floor, the animators then used them as reference to create the hundreds of golem-like zombies. They end up overtaking the island and pulling Harry in. Just when it seems like this is the end, he emerges to see Dumbledore make a last stand. Can we cut? I'm an old man! But when the two return to Hogwarts, the Death Eaters show up, Snape joins them, and the candles in the Great Hall are extinguished. Dumbledore is gone, and now more than ever, we'll need a hero in Deathly Hallows Part 1. The wizarding world is in shambles, paranoia is spreading, and evil is rising. But Snape is looking slay as ever. Seriously. Just look at his eyeshadow progression. When all of Harry's old friends drop into Privet Drive, the first sequence is officially kicked off.
Every film we have a moment, it's sort of where Harry is reminded of the magic and how kind of cool it is. And in this one, that's kind of that moment of just seeing the amazing things magic can do.
Already crammed into a small space, the crew needed the camera to rotate around with Mad Eye to get every actor's performance. Then each person put on a special face paint that could be picked up by the sensors.
Didn't quite understand why we had to wear the face paint, but
they were just having a laugh. Dave's just sitting there going, yeah, more face paint.
Yeah.
They'll never ask why.
With all this data, the VFX studio could then go in and morph between the original actor and Harry, giving us a truly wacky bit of visual effects.
Wow, we're identical.
And for the dressing part of the sequence, Daniel Radcliffe mimicked everyone, carefully studying how each person would take off and put on their clothes.
So Dan would watch Fleur take off her top. We'd talk together about how she would do that, and then Dan would have a go.
Bill, look away. I'm hideous.
Dan had trouble opening a bra. No, hang on, cut that.
This shot here had body doubles reaching in for the clothes. But when we see Harry's face multiple times in the same frame, it required another method. He was filmed in different takes, in every person's outfit against a green screen, as the camera pulled back in the same programmed motion. They carefully stitched each footage together to create one seamless take.
Let's go!
After they're ambushed by a swarm of Death Eaters, Deathly Hallows turns into a Fast and Furious movie, and I friggin' love it. By working out all the necessary shots with previs again, planning out every little moment, they then knew exactly what to get on camera, on location, and on set. They could then mix in digital doubles of Harry and Hagrid, sometimes replacing way more than you realized. Later on, Harry, Ron, and Hermione managed to escape back to Grimmauld Place, and it's here that we get a better look at Kreacher. Judging from the concept art, you can tell Kreacher's just given up. He just doesn't have that same twinkle in his eyes as Dobby.
His face is wrinkled into this scowl that is fixed on his face. His body is crooked, and I feel like he's in a lot of pain.
Just look at that little elf butt. Can I pinch it? I just want to pinch it. Starting with a stand-in about the approximate height, they'd go off their performance on set and build up the CG model. From every blink to tongue movement to the last step of getting Kreacher into the scene, the trio learns that a Horcrux is in the Ministry of Magic, so they take Polyjuice Potion again and go back for a visit. Okay, this is like my worst nightmare. After getting the locket and trying to escape, they end up apparating into the middle of the woods.
Accio detonate!
Oh, so that's how they did that. From an earlier scene, Emma Watson reached right through her beaded bag, and the VFX artists painted out her arm in post-production. Two very different methods that pull off the same bit of magic. And now, the three travel across a Windows XP desktop. Simple shots like these also needed some set extensions. Later on, Harry and Hermione travel to Godric's Hollow. It's here that Voldemort's snake Nagini comes out of Bathilda Bagshot's throat. Starting with previs, the team was able to work out important story beats.
The snake's double was a pole with a boxing glove tied to the end, and then Greg really just planted the front foot and it went up and smacked me in the mouth. So I had a fat lip for about a day, but it's really calmed down.
With all the footage shot, the VFX artists put in the snake layer by layer, creating a super intense scene. When Ron saves Harry from an icy cold lake, they open the locket and he sees all his greatest fears, including this one. I told you I don't need a seat. Well, actually, keep that one playing a bit. Aw man, the gang ends up being caught by Snatchers and held prisoner at Malfoy Manor. But in the split second they try to disapparate, Bellatrix throws a knife in.
Dobby is happy to be with his friends.
He's happy to be with his friends.
Harry Potter.
And his last words were Harry Potter. They give Dobby a proper goodbye, and Voldemort goes for the Elder Wand. Now, armed with the greatest weapon on Earth, he's about to cause some serious problems.
But first, let me take a selfie.
It's finally come, the Deathly Hallows, Part 2. Students flood the halls, statues come to life, and all the teachers form a protective shield around the school. On the other side, Voldemort and his Death Eaters try to break through. I might have a problem. To see Hogwarts fall apart before our very eyes was pretty devastating. And since they couldn't destroy that real model they made for the last movie, they had to recreate Hogwarts entirely with CGI.
We wanted to travel through the castle in a way that we hadn't before.
Basically, fly the camera from a mile away from the school all the way in through a window.
When it came to the Quidditch stadium, having it be fully CG allowed them to really break it apart. Later on, Harry tracks down Helena Ravenclaw and tries to find out where her lost diadem is.
I know!
Oh! Eventually he finds it in the Room of Requirement. Already an impressive set piled to the ceiling with random crap. It gave enough for the actors to climb and the VFX artists to seamlessly extend the space. When Malfoy and his goons show up, a spell gone wrong lights everything on fire. Pyrotechnic stands give the actors more than enough to believe the visual effects that would be added in later. And speaking of spells, there's been a variety. From simple defensive spells to offensive ones. From familiar ones like Expecto Patronum to new ones like this time rewind thing. What was that? I wanted more of that.
The three kids, absolutely no kind of training in terms of combat magic, are always better than any adult they face.
Who knew that waving a stick around would look so good? Later on, Ron and Hermione destroy another Horcrux. The green screen set they're on is replaced with the rest of the Chamber of Secrets and brings a wave that comes crashing down. After that, the two share a kiss, which for the actors wasn't easy. Back on the battlegrounds, the trio looks up at a giant that the VFX artists would later drop in. Similar to how Game of Thrones would mix two separate shots to get a difference in scale, they filmed the giants first against a green screen, then blended them with the original footage. To add that extra bit of dread, they'd use more CGI to enhance their faces. Through a clever combination of different methods, the team brought giants into the battle in a super believable way. Later, Harry finds out that he's the last Horcrux, and to finally defeat Voldemort, he has to sacrifice himself. He wakes up in a blinding white space that curiously resembles King's Cross Station. Oh, ew, ew, ew. Pretty soon, Lila shows up, Dumbledore, and tells him that the fight isn't over yet. That shove always gets me. The Death Eaters carry Harry back to Hogwarts, thinking that their reign of terror can finally begin. But our hero has one more trick up his sleeve. Let's go! Voldemort and Harry battle all throughout the grounds of Hogwarts, even taking their fight into the air. Whee! And after Neville slices off Nagini's head, it gives Harry the opening to deal the finishing blow. What might have looked silly on set was brought to life using first-class visual effects, all to give us this triumphant moment of Voldemort ashing away. the sun comes out, shining a light on the victory our heroes can now share. So at the end of this video, after breaking down 10 years worth of witchcraft and wizardry, I hope you've learned something about how Harry Potter magic was shown on screen. Just because the last movie came out more than a decade ago doesn't mean we can't still reminisce about the franchise and remind ourselves how captivating some of the visual effects were for the time. It's been a journey, hasn't it? And you know, the real magic was the friends we made along the way. Anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble. Hey, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.